to Soul Sparks, where ancient wisdom meets modern healing. I'm your host, Pragya Malviya. Today's guest is someone who truly brings that bridge to life. We are joined by Tasha Martin, licensed social worker, author of New Leaf, and spiritual guide for souls navigating change. For over 20 years, Tasha has been working alongside people through life's toughest transitions, grounding them in the wisdom of the five elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. If life's chaos has dimmed your inner light, this conversation just might spark it back. Let's dive in. Thank you. Thank you, Tasha, for doing this, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you and your audience members.
That is so great. Tasha, I'm so curious. What sparked a new leaf for you, and was it a personal transformation that made you lean into the five elements?
Yes, so beginning between 2022 and 2025, I experienced the loss of over a dozen loved ones, family, mentors, and friends. And during that time, what was really unique and also very traumatizing about my experience is that about a week or two prior to the person dying, I would get a message. I would get a divine message. I would have a prophetic message that something was terribly wrong and that this person was going to die or that they were terminally ill. And it was very scary for me. So it was a very traumatic and shocking experience to my spirituality, to my emotions, and to my cognitive processing as a social worker who has helped other people through their own journeys. I had never experienced this level of trauma before, and so to have a license to be able to help others and then have to turn that on for myself, it was very difficult and challenging. So I had to take a number of steps in order to get back on my in order to get back to myself and to refine my light again. It was very difficult.
I totally get that, and thank you for sharing that with us. Also, when you were moving through that season, through that phase, which element felt like home for you, or which one did you resonate with the most, and the one that really held you when everything else it felt so uncertain, but that one element it felt like home to you. What was it?
I would say that water was the most supportive. So I look at the five elements as earth being the space that helps us to become grounded, water being earth being grounding, stability, connecting with our values and boundaries, and water supporting with emotional release and self-compassion, air getting into the mindset, how we think about things, how we perceive things, our vision, voice, and then fire being connected to purpose, action, and courage, and ether being connected to alignment, our calling, and spiritual connection. And so, what's always been supportive of me is the element of water, because it's been a conduit and allows me to connect with freeing my emotions, but also becoming comfortable enough to hear from spirits, and also tapping into my own spiritual connection. So I would say my number one has been water. And I use it in a number of ways, whether it's a spiritual shower, a bath, or even just washing my hands, or even speaking into my water and having a very and connecting with my water and drinking it very intentionally and allowing those words to come in and calm my nervous system.
I really, really love that. And there is so much comfort in actually, realizing that nature, it does not just mirror our cycles, it mentors us. And thank you for sharing that with us again. And I truly agree that, all these nature forces and water especially, it is that one element which actually resonates with so many people. And I would love to know, when life it really, really feels chaotic, whether it's grief or burnout or the urge to reinvent and the confusion that goes on and on and on. How can these five elements act as a compass for them, and what makes them so grounding in times of change? How does it happen?
So I think it's really important to acknowledge that when we are going through a time of change, we often feel thrown off course and very unbalanced, and so oftentimes disconnected from what we're used to finding comfort in. And so I like to start with regrounding myself, which is connecting with the earth elements. And that could look like going outside and putting my feet into the ground, walking in the grass, laying in the grass. It can also look like sitting and closing our eyes and feeling the breeze on our skin and just feeling the air come across our skin. And grounding can also look like just paying attention to the various colors and textures and sounds around us because it's reconnecting us with the present. And so I like to do that to remind myself that I am safe in my body. And so when people are healing, they have to first feel safe to even be vulnerable with themselves and accept that change is here, and we have to honor that change is here and take some steps to go through what we're facing. And so I'll say that starting off with the earth element is very significant to feel safe so that we can trust ourselves to make the decisions and to trust our own intuition to get us to where we need to go. And then from the earth element, I like to move into the element of water to start to release some of those uncomfortable emotions, but then to also have some self compassion and to replenish ourselves because we know water is hydrating. And when you're very stressed, it's really important that you stay hydrated. So I like to go to water next before getting into air and really paying attention to what thought processes and perceptions do I have about this experience that could potentially be blocking me from accepting what is happening and from acknowledging that things can get better, and that I can come out of this before I even step into the element of fire and being prepared to take action. So I like to follow that process when I am tapping into the elements, and then ether just recognizing that opportunities are endless, that this is not the end, and that there's more to come on the other side.
I really love that take. And I've also been very fond of this phrase that you also talk about, rituals for the modern mystic. What do these look like in everyday life? And are we talking simple practices or something more ceremonial, something more ritualistic? Could you please define it as for, it for us?
Absolutely. So there are practices that we do every single day that I don't think that we recognize we're doing. And our words carry so much power behind them. And so the just the simple use of our words can really drive us in one direction or another. So something very practical that I like to do is even when I am waking up and leaving before I go out into the world, when I am preparing myself, I utilize water to as a way of bringing in love, as a way of receiving positive messages. And this could look like finding oils such as eucalyptus oil, or even using honey or using rose oil. And these things bring clarity and sweetness to us. They bring beauty to us. And putting those things into our water when we are showering and preparing ourselves for the world. On the opposite side, when I would return home from being out in the world, which can be very chaotic or stressful, when I do my shower, I will wash off the day and I will say the stress that I experienced today is not mine. The any hurt words or harmful things that I experienced, they do not belong to me. They do not have permission to stay here. And so the words that I speak into my water are words that everyone can speak into their water to claim the things that we need for ourselves and to release the things that do not belong to us. That is one of the most powerful rituals That is, it does not take a lot of training to do. You don't have to go into a classroom to do that. You don't need to call a spiritual practitioner. It is something that we all have access to in the comfort of our own home.
I totally get that. And also, there are so many practices that we do, but we often, end up, or they end up being another obligation or another to-do list that, just makes it totally not impossible, but hard to practice. So, how do we keep these practices from feeling sacred? How do we just keep them so sacred rather than as an obligation or as a to-do list?
Mhm. I think you raise a really good point because we often feel obligated to engage in a practice, or we feel guilty that we're not doing something with fidelity. And that is a guilt that we have to release, right? The beauty of living in our journey is that we are all operating on our own pace. So yes, the world would like us to move quickly. Everyone, your neighbor would like you to go at a certain speed, but ultimately we have to move at our own pace. And so if you're in a time where waking up and sitting down for a mindful moment is not where you are, embrace that it is okay. If it feels most comfortable for you to look in the mirror and state words of affirmations to let you know and remind you that you are powerful and you can do this, then that is okay too. And if the only thing you can do is take a shower or wash your hands and embrace the water that is flowing over you, that is okay. So it looks very different for each one of us. And when we honor that our journeys do not have to be the same, we will heal in a way that allows us to feel whole and like ourselves, and we honor ourselves rather than trying to honor a journey that someone else says it has to look.
So rightly said and so rightly put up. Also, I really feel that the way you described it, the way you put it through, it really is that one step that can be done. To not feel really gated towards a particular practice. That was so right. Also, would you say that ether it is more about intuition and spirit, or is it something even broader, like the essence that ties everything together? Or because it, to me, it feels like the most, elusive element, almost like the space that is between things. So, what would you like to say that is it more about intuition and spirit, or something even more complex?
I would say that it's something even more complex. Um, but for the sake of my journey, the way I tapped into ether was connecting it to my ancestors. And in my culture, I believe that the body may die, but the spirit moves on. And so ether for me is the specific chapter that focuses on grief, the grief journey, after someone has died. And the way I like to look at it is I still have the ability to connect with this loved one who meant so much to me, and I do not have to let them go in the spiritual world. And so the way I used the chapter of ether was to provide rituals that said I can grieve in the way that feels most welcoming and supportive of me in this moment. I also use ether to engage in ancestor veneration, where I may be selecting an object or a food item that was one of my ancestors' favorite things. And I will sit and connect with them either by eating what they love to eat and honoring that that was for them, putting their picture up and playing their favorite music, whether it is taking a shirt that was their favorite color and wearing their favorite color on a particular day. So it's really connecting with the spiritual world and honoring that our ancestors are forever here with us and they are living through eternity, and that they are here to support us in our own journey. And so that is how I utilize the chapter of ether, is to stay connected in the spiritual world. But like you said, ether is so vast. It's endless. It's hard to really even define or explain, but that is how I utilize it for the sake of my own transition following the series of deaths that I experienced.
I love that. I love that. And yes, that was so insightful. Also, with the speed of life, which is constant notifications, noise, the chaos all around us, how
Mhm.
do we reclaim the presence and joy without running away from our responsibilities and responsibilities towards us as well? What do you have to say about it?
So, as a leader, I experienced a lot of these deaths when serving as the vice president at an organization. And so, with my role came a lot of responsibility, not just for moving my team along, but also for supporting my team's emotional well-being, their growth in the organization, and helping the organization to meet its goals and metrics. And so that responsibility never left while I was grieving. And so what I had to learn to do in order to honor myself was to be vulnerable. And this is what I'm going to share is pretty risky, especially as a woman in leadership, but being vulnerable to say to my leader colleagues and to my team and to my manager, who's the CEO, to say, look, I am not well right now. And what that means is that my processing, my decision making, it may take a little bit more time for me to process and get to the decision, because I do want to get to the right decision, but it's going to take a little bit more patience from those around me. It also required me to say to the folks in the room who reported to me and who were my team members, my colleagues, to say, hey, I need to trust you to do something that I would typically do. Whether that would be, I need to trust your leadership to make a decision in this moment. That's what I would have to do, because ultimately, we have to know when we have to step away for a moment, because we still have to meet the goals. And we don't want to create a situation where people are being harmed or we're not meeting the goals of the organization. So it's a lot of responsibility, especially in leadership, to grieve. But ultimately, I had to make space for myself, and that meant trusting people around me.
Mm-hmm. I again love that, and yes, it was so great. Also, do you think that sacred living is this a big lifestyle shift that everybody is, looking forward to, or is it really about those tiny intentional choices that we make moment by moment?
When I think about the elders and the generations before us, I think sacred living was just everyday living, right? I think because we've tied ourselves up in the idea that we have to hustle, 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 that we've lost the art of sacred living. But I do think that since the pandemic, folks have started to re-identify a need to engage in this type of practice where we slow down and we honor ourselves. So I would say that it's a little bit of both. I think we're coming full circle with this idea of secret living. And that means that over time, we've lost some of those practices, but now we're really seeking to regain what our elders and our ancestors already knew, which is to rest, which is to be with the elements, to tap into the elements of earth, water, air, fire, and ether, which means to congregate and spend time with our loved ones, but to also listen to our bodies. And so I think that we're getting back to a place of sacred living, which I think is absolutely beautiful and necessary. And so we just have to lean on each other and learn from one another on how to do those things again, because it's possible.
I totally agree with you. And yes, the earlier generations, they really had it in them. And yes, I again totally agree with whatever you said, and it really resonates with so many beliefs and the values that people hold. Also, to our listeners, whether you are rooted in earth or dancing in fire, Tasha Martin reminds us that we already holds the elements we need to heal and bloom again. The mystic is not out there, it's within you, in every pause, every breath, every act of presence that is there. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, Tasha, and thank you, listeners, for listening. I am Pragya Malviya, and until next time, stay grounded, stay luminous, and let your soul spark again, right here on Soul Sparks. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.